I became an actor by accident, not by design. My father was a poet, a rather famous American Beatnik poet, James Lipton. My mother was a teacher, and I was taught to read at the age of 1.5. Hard to believe. My mother finally convinced me that it was so, showed me evidence. And I was writing epic poetry by the age of 3, terrible poetry, which I dictated. My father would scrupulously note. And by the time I was 12, I'd written 3 novels. I mention that only because my father was a famous eccentric, beatnik, all of that. He also left when I was very young. And since my father was a poet, my mother a teacher, we didn't exactly wallow in money. And once he was gone, there was nothing. So it was tough times. The point of that is that I associated my father's profession with my father's behavior. And as a result, I ran as far away from it as possible. That said, when I went to school, my intention was to be a lawyer. I attended university. That was still the clear intention. I was going to be a lawyer. Why? Because it was as far as I could get from my father's antics and world. I thought that the world of the arts probably led people into the kind of behavior that I'd seen with him and that had resulted in a lot of hard times for my mother and me. So that was the intention. However, since we didn't have any money, I had to work from the age of 13. I worked an assortment of jobs. One of the things that I liked to do was acting in school, the way one would in high school. And I was a member of the Catholic Theater in Detroit, which was a very good theater group, and I acted there. And one night, someone came backstage and said to me, you know, you could earn a living as an actor. You're good enough. And at that time, I was a copy boy at the Detroit Times, and I said, well, you think that, not immediately, but in time, I might possibly earn as much as an actor as I'm currently earning as a copy boy at the Detroit Times. And he said, yes, I think you could count on that. So I became a professional actor in Detroit, and I was able to earn some money. It was a good job because it permitted me to study. It fit perfectly with school. And I could, in high school and then subsequently in college, I was able to earn money, which supported my mother and me. She was working as well. And I could go to school. That was all I cared about. I was going to be a lawyer. I was not going to be a poet. I was not going to write. I had stopped writing at the age of 18. I'd written incessantly before that. I read, of course, because I was in university, but I wasn't going to write. I wasn't going to do any of those dangerous things. I was going to be a stolid, bourgeois lawyer. And then I decided to come to New York to finish my education and to get the law degree. I arrived in New York and looked around me, and this was a time when New York was teeming with great teachers of acting: Stella Adler, Sandy Meisner, Robert Lewis, Harold Clurman, Lee Strasberg. The Actors Studio was flourishing, and many of the actors that we remember with great admiration were living in New York in those days, working in the theater at night, studying at night and in the daytime. And this was before the exodus to Los Angeles, when television moved out there for real estate reasons, and then the actors followed, of course. But at that time, it was the golden age of American acting education. I looked around me and I thought, well, if I'm going to continue to support my schooling and my mother and me, she had moved to New York and she was working, but still I had to work. And if I'm going to earn a living at all in this, I'm going to have to compete, and it's a very, very fast track. And so I started looking around, and one day I walked into a room and there was a woman, flamboyant, dyed blonde hair, stentorian voice, grand gestures, a grande dame, in short. Her name was Stella Adler. And she talked to me for a while and asked why I wanted to study with her, and I told her that I had to earn a living and that I wanted to do it as well as I could. I didn't like amateurism in anybody else, and certainly not in myself, and I would like to learn how to act, really learn how to act. And from everything I had read and heard, she was the teacher I would like to study with. She took me. I studied with her for 2.5 years. Her course was 2 years. She asked me to stay an additional 6 months and assist her when I finished the course. But about 6 months into it, it was full time, I woke up one morning, looked in the mirror and said, "Who the hell are you kidding? You don't want to be a lawyer. Never did want to be a lawyer. This is what you would like to do." And so it began. I embarked on nearly 12 years of full-time education. I studied 2.5 years with Stella Adler, 4 years with Harold Clurman, to whom she had been married. He was a founder of the group theater, and 2 years with Robert Lewis, also out of the group theater. I studied modern dance with Hanya Holm and Alvin Nikolai. I then went on to study classical ballet with Ella Duganova. I studied Cicchetti technique with her, and then Russian technique with Ben Harvey. It came upon me incrementally, and finally I was clearly, for better or for worse, going to devote my life to these arts.